All right. For those of you that haven't attended a session before or haven't seen some of our videos, hi, I'm Dr. John Lohr, Vice President of STEM Education here with Science Olympiad, welcoming you to tonight's webinar. I'm super excited because I love listening to John talk about not only Codebusters, but just teaching people about different ciphers, their uses, their history. It's one of the sessions I always look forward to every year because I walk away learning something. So we want to get right to John, but there are a couple little housekeeping things just want to remind people of. First and foremost, everything is being recorded. You're going to get a link to the recording. You'll get it both as a place where you can view it in the cloud, and then we'll get it posted on Science Olympiad TV, our YouTube channel. John has already shared the slides for tonight's session with me. We'll be getting the slides out as well, so you guys will have access to the slides. Last but not least, if you would please, just to make sure it's working for us, if you'd go ahead in the chat and kind of give us name, location, high school, middle school, that would be great. And if you have any problems or any concerns about something, please feel free to put that information in the chat. Also, should John ask you guys questions or look for any kind of interactive elements, please put that information in the chat. If you have questions that you want answered during the session, we're going to do our best, and we've gotten time blocked out to make sure we can get to questions, but use the Q&A feature, and that's the little box with the question mark in it that's kind of on the right-hand side of your Zoom control panel. All right. Then without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter tonight, the original Codebuster himself, John Toebes from North Carolina. So thank you, John, for doing this tonight.
Well, thank you, John. I'm really happy to be here. Tonight, I'm going to give everybody some hints, some ways that you can be more successful at Codebusters, a couple of tips and tricks, and some pointers of places where you can find information. I've got a bunch of slides here, but I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. The slides are going to be available to you. They're going to have notes. There's some notes on there that you can use. But hopefully I'm going to try and leave as much time for questions. But if you have no questions, then we're going to be done quickly. So with that, let me point out a couple things. I do have to give a very important disclaimer that anything I say in here that's in conflict with the rules win. Even though I may have written the rules still win with anything that might be any mistakes that you find here. So I want to point out, for those of people that have done Codebusters over the past couple of years, in particular between last year and this year, there are no real significant changes. The only thing we've done is we've tightened up the rules a little bit. We want to make it so you can solve the ciphers. And for that, first and foremost, whenever there's a crib, in other words, when we're telling you where the plain text is that match against the ciphertext, it has to be identified where it is. I've seen a couple of ciphers on tests where, for example, there was a fractionated Morse that they didn't tell you where the crib was, and I personally spent 2 hours and could not solve it. That's not what we want. We want you to be solving these. We want you to solve in a reasonable time. So for that reason, we've made sure that we will tell you where the crib is. There's one exception to that rule, and that is for the complete columnar. Obviously, if we tell you where the crib is, it makes the columnar trivial to solve. Also, this is just a mistake. For Cryptarithms, you have to get all of them right in order to get a perfect score, so you don't get the free mistakes. And I saw there was at least one elementary school. There's for Division A, we do have a new cipher, the Knights Templar cipher that we've added. I really like that cipher. In fact, there's some debate about how it's supposed to be done, and I ended up going and correcting Wikipedia so that it had it correctly. Now, this is just an overview of all the ciphers, as you should know what they are, but I wanted people to realize that we have a nice continuum where we're taking people all the way from Division A to Division C with it. Here's what you're here for. I'm going to give you 11 hints. These are, if you follow these are techniques that will allow you to score better on the test. First and foremost, there is this big, long document. It's a 100-page document. In fact, here's what it looks like. And it is a very useful document for a couple of reasons. You're not going to read the whole thing from front to back, but we have a description for every one of the ciphers, including an example of how to solve it and references where you would go. These are the places that I would go when I'm looking for information about a cipher. So since I'm writing a lot of tests, maybe where I'm going might be a place that you might find useful as a hint as to what you might find on a test. But this has, for all of the ciphers, and tells you whether it's division A, B, or C, a description of it. And then what we do is we go in and show you an example of solving the cipher. And these are written with my notes. As I'm solving it, here's what I'm thinking about to give you some hints as to how you might approach solving the cipher. So that's the first and foremost one. Obviously, you're not going to read the entire 100-page document. Maybe you can give it to your coach and have them read the document to be knowledgeable in it. But it's designed for you to go find the cipher that you're working on, get the background on it, and then get a sample on how it is solved. All right. The second hint I'm going to tell you. Plain and simple, you want to score high, learn more than aristocrats. Now, aristocrats typically will comprise between 45 and 50% of the ciphers on a test. So if you learn more than aristocrats, you'll be in much better shape, particularly since some of those aristocrats are going to be fairly hard. The next thing, when I watch the teams that do the best, the first thing that they do is not actually solve a cipher. They take the test, they separate it out, and they make a quick decision as who is going to attack what as a team. Next thing, get yourself a calculator you're comfortable with, and make sure it is one of those class 1 4-function calculators, like this calculator. We hate it when you walk in and we have to take away a calculator, not let you use a calculator because it's got more than what's allowed. Get one. These are cheap. Put it in your pocket. Be familiar with it. Also, learn when it's time to give up on a cipher. And I'll use a specific example. I made a mistake when I wrote the national test 2 years ago. I made the time question way too hard. I deliberately didn't use any pattern words. In fact, I used things which are like the 4th or the 5th match for the pattern word. And the only one team solved it in 2 minutes, another team solved it in 9 minutes, and nobody else solved it. Well, some of the better teams got smart after 3 minutes and just gave up. So they went on working on other things. And that's a good lesson, that sometimes a cipher might be too hard or it just doesn't match the way you're thinking that day. That's okay. There's plenty of questions on the test. We designed the test so you cannot do them all. We don't want you to solve all of them, because if you did, it means that we didn't put enough of the ones that you might find interesting or the ones that you don't necessarily like and want to avoid. So this combination of knowing what to attack and being willing to give up when something's a little bit too hard is important. And along those lines, don't be afraid to specialize. I've seen kids that just love the Baconian. I've seen other kids who really like the Porta, or they like the Hill cipher. That's okay. Having somebody on the team who's really good at some of them is a big win. Just hand it to them, let them go and attack it, and you go and attack the ones that you like. Also, this is a really well-hidden secret. Plan for the tiebreaker. And how do the tiebreakers? The highest scoring question is the first tiebreaker. Well, okay, maybe you can't solve the tiebreaker. Don't bother. If you think, the highest scoring question, if you think there's a chance that somebody else might do all the same questions as you did, and you want to make sure you win the tie, go find the highest scoring question on there and make sure that you fill in at least one letter correctly. How do you do that? Well, it's probably a Xenocrypt. I look at the highest frequency letter and assume that it's an E. So just pick that. And you have that frequency table on there. Also, the special bonus. I'll talk about this in a minute. Do the special bonus. The big win on that. That's why we put it in there. We want you to do it, and there's a lot of reward for it. Also remember, 2 or fewer mistakes is still full score. I've seen people try and work on that last letter to make sure if it's not going to get you any points, skip and run to the next one. Along the same lines, if you're stuck, if you've done everything and you're stuck, there's no harm in guessing. Take a guess and move forward. Also, highlighters are a writing utensil. You are allowed to bring highlighters. For some of these ciphers, having highlighters so that you could highlight different, like for example, a different mapping column or a different keyword, it's a great thing to use. If you walked in with 5 different color highlighters, no one's going to say anything wrong with that. In fact, you know, I tell you, the people running the event will be impressed. All right, I mentioned the special bonus question. There will be up to 3 questions on the test marked as a special bonus, and they will not be an aristocrat. Remember, we want you to do other ciphers. If I were writing the test, one of the ciphers is going to be a Baconian, one of them will be a complete columnar, and one of them will be a nihilist. Other people listen to me if they're writing the test. So those are good ones to learn, particularly in general when a new cipher is introduced. Almost certainly that new cipher is going to be one of the special bonus. Now, I'm not saying that they will only be a Baconian complete column nihilist. Somebody could be mean to you and make them all be the, I don't know, fractionated Morse. But you can expect to see something that's interesting and challenging. Here's the important thing. If you get all 3 of them right with no penalty points, it's 750 points. That is huge. That's, you know, if you're solving a bunch of, that's a third of your score. I have seen teams medal by only solving the time question and the 3 special bonus. It is possible to do that. So, and by the way, that 750 bonus points is in addition to the points for the ciphers themselves. Okay, I gave you this list of what's at the state and national, only to let you know that don't bother practicing until you get closer to states and national. Right? Focus on a lot of the other things to get yourself to states, but these are things you can learn after your team has advanced to states. Okay. I want to point out that aristocrats and patristocrats, as you know, they can be done with a random alphabet. And many teams solve them as if they're solving a random alphabet. Even when it's a K1 or K2. Well, let me tell you, a K1 and K2 is there to make it easier on you. If you can actually see where the keyword is, and then you can start seeing where the groups of letters go in sequence, that makes it faster for solving. So it is something to pay attention to, knowing the K1 and K2. And I actually have a description here of, you can see a K1, and important to note that with a K1, the frequency and the letter it maps to are one above each other. But when you do with a K2, you have to pretend that these are 2 separate tables that have nothing to do with one another. The bottom is the frequency, and the top is the mapping of the letters. We do this so that it maps the way that you're putting the letters over the cipher. So I have seen people get confused by the K2 table and treat it like they were doing a K1, and then they end up not solving the cipher. K3, the one thing to note about a K3 is when you're done with it, you'll have to figure out the mapping in order to get it, but the order in which the letter is going to appear in the table are mostly random. So you don't have, with like a K1 and a K2, where the letters allow you to fill in the gaps. With a K3, they're not going to help you fill in the gaps very much. All right, now, a couple of hints about aristocrats. First and foremost, pay attention to the score. You'd be surprised how much of a hint the score is. So if someone gives you an aristocrat and they tell you the score is 200 points, and there's another aristocrat and the score is 500 points, I guarantee you that the 200 point E is going to be the high frequency letter. The 500 point, I wouldn't bet on E being the high frequency letter. So the higher the score generally means a lower frequency match. With that being said, learn pattern words. If you saw A, B, C, A as a 4-letter word on the test, Most of you will know that that's the word that. Also, the K1 and K2 keywords, take advantage of them. There really is a whole bunch of hints that you get out of that, and you can solve it a lot faster when you see the K1 and K2. Now, granted, I know a few teams that I've seen who don't need the keywords at all, and they understand the pattern words, and they're just intuitively jumping at the letters, but that's not true of all the teams. The K1 and K2 is there to make your life easier. Also, if you're looking for where the K1 and K2 keyword is, so remember on this previous one, you can see that the keyword I have at the very beginning, if I were writing the test and I'm trying to make it easy, then the keyword would be near the beginning of the list. If I'm writing a test and I want to make it be hard, the keyword is going to span around the end of the alphabet and wrap around to the beginning. So instead of the keyword being in the beginning, K-E-Y would be mapping over the X, Y, and Z. W-O-R-D would be the A, B, C, and D. So the difficulty of the test is a clue maybe where the keyword might be located. And I'm not going to repeat what's already in there. The Cryptogram's puzzle.com tutorial, in my opinion, is one of the best tutorials I've seen out there for how to solve aristocrats. Give credit where credit is due. I think they've done a great job. Okay, now, Codebusters Division C, sometimes we're going to ask you for a keyword answer. I have seen teams solve the cipher and get 0 points because they didn't fill in what the keyword is. We don't care whether you solve the cipher. It's not important to solve the cipher. We want you to figure out what the keyword mapping is. And we deliberately try and make those ciphers so you might figure out the keyword mapping before you have the cipher fully solved. And sometimes the answer is just a word, sometimes it's a block of letters, but we tell you how many letters. And we're telling you that while the answer block may have repeated letters, the length is the maximum amount of letters going to be in the answer block, and everything else is going to be in alphabetical order. Also, pay attention. When the keyword answer is being requested, you may not make any mistakes in order to get full credit. So each mistake is 100 points off. Okay, time question hint. This is the one time where it makes sense for all hands on deck. Here's a strategy that you might consider. You got 3 people on the team. You all know how to work well together. You've been working well together for a while. Have one person focus primarily on solving the cipher. You have another person who's primarily responsible for maintaining the frequency table. In other words, when the first person finds a letter that maps, they immediately go down and they fill it in the frequency table. And then you have the third person who's replicating the things that have been added into the frequency table to the cipher. Now, I'm not saying that everybody can't do some portion of these, but if you have that distribution of duty, it means that the person who is solving, all of a sudden things just get filled in for them. Also, as I mentioned, know when to give up. Sometimes the time question's too hard, and I've seen teams spend, all 3 kids on the team spend the full 10 minutes and don't get it. That's 20% of your time. 20% of your time that's gone. They won't get back. 10 minutes out of 50 minutes. So be prepared to give up. And also remember, you don't have to get them all before raising your hand to say you got it. You can have 2 mistakes, and we'll tell you whether you've got it right or wrong. And if you got it wrong, you can keep working. All right. The only reason I'm going to mention the Atbash is for Division B. Sometimes you have to fill somebody in at the last minute. You can teach them the Atbash cipher in 3 minutes while you're waiting at the door to walk into the event. Or your coach should be prepared to teach them the Atbash. There's only 13 letters and they're reversible. A maps to Z and the table's on the test. So if you tell them where the table is and show them what it looks like, they can attack it. Porta is another gimme cipher. You should get this one. If you see a Porta, there is no reason for you to not get this. It's very quick. You just need to make sure you know how to map the table, remembering that if it's A to M, you use the letter at the top of the row. If it's N to Z, then you go and find it in the coded letter and you swap it. That's it. It should take you should be able to teach somebody the Porta cipher in about 5 minutes, And there's no reason for you to not get all the Porta ciphers on your test. All right, fractionated Morse. This seems to scare a lot of people. And as I mentioned, I have seen a fractionated Morse that I can't solve. But it's not that bad. If you know Morse code, we give you the Morse code on the table, and you take the crib that they give you, you'd be surprised how much of the answer you get. And because it's an alphabet, that alphabet gives you a lot more clues as to what things map to which. There's an example that I have in that cipher document that will give you some hints on how, shows you the strategy for solving. All right, cryptarithms. I'm going to let you in on a secret. We want you to solve them. And sometimes they're hard. But most of the time, it's generally pretty obvious what 1, 9, and 0 map to. That's 3 of the 10 letters immediately. How is that going to be? Because if you see one that maybe has a 7-digit answer, and you have a 5-digit letter, 5-digit word added to a 6-digit word, producing a 7-digit answer, that tells you immediately 3 of the letters. We know that the first two in the answer is 1 and 0, and the first one in the longer one is a 9. Think about the math for doing that. Now, this is something that a lot of people miss out. Use the solution, the solution you're trying to do, to help figure out some of the other letters. So in other words, as you know some of the letters, go put it in there, and then you can try and anagram the letters to go and figure out what's going on. So you have 2 ways of attacking this problem. You can do all the math and figure it out, or you can also look at what letters you have in the solution and kind of figure out what must be a possible word. Now, I tend to pick odd phrases, like one of the ones I had on a test was pink bunny slippers. So it might not be an obvious thing, but there's 2 ways of working the problem. Nihilist. Nihilist is really not that hard to do, particularly at the regional level, because we give you all the keywords. All you have to do is do the encoding, and the math doesn't require a calculator. Then the largest numbers you're going to add are 55 and 55, and most of us know that that is 173. No, it's 110. So all the math can be done in your head. It's very easy to do. This is another one that I consider almost a gimme. Now, the cryptanalysis at the state level is a little bit harder, but it's not too bad. There's a lot of techniques that we give you for solving it. All right, complete columnar.
John?
Yes, John.
The nihilist question came in, and let me pull it up from Lucas. And Lucas says that they get in trouble. His team gets in trouble with the nihilist when the polybus key is not given. Is there tips and things they could do when that happens?
So if you're at the regional level, that the rules state that both the keyword and the Polybius key have to be given. At the state level, it is not given. You have to figure it out. And if you go to that document, I've actually given some descriptions of approaches for solving it. As well, if you use the Codebusters tools, there are some, the auto solver will show you how you might derive it. So there is some math that's associated with it. The reason why we added the nihilist is that there's a major flaw in how it works that makes it easy to decode by hand. Because of the fact that everything is 1 to 5, it forces some limitations as to what things might be. But at the regional level, you should have both the keyword and the Polybius key. If not, we need to make sure that those.
I suspect he's probably been doing a couple of invitationals, and they're probably doing state and national.
Okay. At the state and national, when you are doing a cryptanalysis, correct? You're not given, and I've got some examples on that. I'll get back some on the with the Porta. Someone asked the question, similar thing on the state and the national level. Let me go back. Yes, there is an interesting trick about the Porta, and that is because there's only 13 possibilities, and because A through M maps through N through Z, you would be surprised how quickly, if you pay attention to that, how quickly you can see the only possible word it could be. So you know that everything in there, so for example, THAT is going to be the first letter, and the last letter will have to be A through M, and then the middle two letters will have to be N through Z. And because of that, that makes it easier for you to figure out what the words possibly might be. And also, because you are given from a cryptanalysis, you are given a crib, that will tell you immediately what the some of the letters are. That immediately tells you the keyword, and because it's generally going to be one letter more, so you have to just figure out where the start and the end of the keyword is. But there's a real interesting trick. When you start to see a pattern in the keyword, you know that it's going to be that number of letters from the start of the cipher. All right, let me jump forward here. So complete columnar. It is important to know what level you're doing because the number of columns is restricted. For example, division B, you won't get more than 9 columns. Division C, you can get up to 11 columns, but that's only when you're at state and nationals. So when you look at the number of letters, so for example, if the cipher has 33 letters in it, that tells me immediately it's a 3-column cipher. How do I know that? 33 only factors into 3 and 11 and can't be 11, so therefore it's 3. Also, you can take a pretty good guess which one it's likely to be. When you have a 3, 5, or 6, almost always it's going to be a 5. It's rarely going to be a 3 unless we're forced into it. So look at the factors and use that as a very first guess. The other thing is look where the X's are. If now someone may have an X in there, but generally X's are going to be at the end. So see how that guess gets you in terms of the X's. Also, don't spend your time rewriting all the columns once you figured out the order. This is where the highlighting works very well. If you have highlighters and you're pretty sure of the number of columns, then you can use the highlighters and then read it out from there. Because when you think about 50 letters and rewriting 50 letters, that's time. Versus just simply marking where they are, then you'll save some time for doing it. Remember, doing a Codebusters test is all about time management. You're trying to see how quickly can you get through things. All right, my favorite, Baconian. I am surprised at the number of people that just simply skip Baconian. And I've had other teams that have done it, and they find the Baconian is the easiest one to do. What you need to do is a couple of tricks. Baconians break into groups of 5. And what you should do if you're doing a symbol Baconian, there's 3 types. With a symbol, count the number of symbols. Generally, with the symbols, there's going to be 4 different types of symbols, and usually they might be conflicting. In other words, maybe there's an up arrow and a right arrow and a down arrow and a left arrow. Okay, is it the up and down or left and right or up and right and left and down? Count them to figure out how many there are. And pick a cluster of them. Also note, very importantly, no group of 5 will start with BB. So if you see, something that's the same at the start of the group of 5, you know that that's an A. It's a really strong hint. Also, if you count them, if there's only 2 symbols, I guarantee you the A symbols will outnumber the B symbols by about 30%. You can go halfway. You just simply count up for what you think is an A, count down for what you think is a B, and if you ever get to a fairly large number up, positive or negative, then you know that either if it's positive, then know you're right. If it's negative, you got them reversed. Also, I see many teams do this. It's not IJ as an answer. You have to pick the single letter that is correct. Okay, sequence Baconian. These are a lot of fun. And what you really need to do is you need to look at the length of the sequence. And you want to compare what's different between the symbols. The mistake that people make is they assume that all the positions follow the same rule. They don't. Different positions may have different rules. So, we might have something where there's above and below. Maybe the symbol is different above and below. I'm just giving you some examples here of the different things you could have. So pay attention to it's the position in the sequence that matters, not the overall, it's not that it's the up level that matters. And there's lots of different patterns you might see for this. The other one that's really, really, really easy and almost everybody seems to skip by is the word Baconian. Basically, we're going to tell you the mapping of a whole bunch of the letters. And what you want to do is go map them and then look for a pattern. The pattern is generally going to be, 2 A's, 2 B's, 2 A's, and it's a repeating pattern. We don't want you to not find it. So it could be any number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, 13. The first half of the alphabet is A and the next half of the alphabet is B. That's it. If you look for that, once you find the pattern, then you have this. You can solve it in no time. And by the way, I've seen some people that after they built that table, they just simply sight read the Baconian. All right. All I'd say is on the Xenocrypt, the frequency table is really your friend. The Xenocrypts are designed, they are Spanish. We try and use a lot of cognates. A cognate is a word that's the same in English and in Spanish. Ciencia is a good example of one that you'll see both English and Spanish. And we also have a K1 or K2. A Xenocrypt is almost always going to have a K1 or K2 alphabet using an English keyword. So there's another way that you can solve it pretty quickly. All right, Affine, and this is going to be true for the Hill cipher. Couple of things. Get familiar with your calculator. First thing you want to do with your calculator, load in 26 in the memory. And so then instead of typing 26 every time, you can hit memory recall. 2 strokes versus 1, you don't even have to make a mistake. And I've seen people make a mistake, type 25 instead of 26. So put that in your calculator and you'll go a lot faster there. And also remember you have to round, not truncate. Perfect example, if you want us to understand, take your calculator, 9 divided by 26, multiply by 26 is not 9. So, and I've seen way too many people just take that 8 as the answer and not get it right. Also, by the way, if the number's less than 50, when you're trying to get a mod 26, don't do the division and multiply. Just subtract the memory recall and you'll know what it is. And let's say, same thing for the Hill cipher. Hill cipher is just a bunch of math with 26. All you got to do is know how the matrix works. Hill cipher is a very easy one to get. All right. Let's see. I saw there was a couple of division A. I'm going to real quickly point out this is a new cipher, the Knights Templar. You have to pay attention very much because you've got this part at A, B, C. So you've got the triangles, you have the angles, the triangles, and the kites. 2, 3, and 4, and they're in clockwise order for this one, for the first one, for the third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one. But the second and the last one, there's a different variation. The second one goes across and then down, and the last one goes down. Goes up and around. So just memorize that. It's real easy to do. And I'll mention the tap code cipher. You can learn this table, but you could learn it the way the Prisoners of War did it. If you remember the letters AFLQV, then when you see 2 taps, AF. Oh, I'm sorry, this is just one. A. Okay, we're done. And then for the next letter, you start with A. Here's one that's 5 taps. A, F, L, Q, V. V, W, X, Y, Z. So 5, 5 is the letter Z. E, A. A, B, C, D, E. And that's the letter E. So if you do that, you can actually just simply run through it very quickly without having built that table. All right, some strategies for success. These are things we suggest if you want to be successful. Practice. Duh. Of course I was going to tell you have to practice. But really, the more you practice, the more familiar you get with some of these ciphers. And as you know, 3 students on the team. This is an event you're allowed 3. Go in with 3. Even if you have to add somebody at the last minute and teach them how to do the Porta cipher or the Atbash cipher, it still is going to take some. They're going to take up some of the slack. Learn how to divide and conquer. Split up the test. As I said, first thing you do when you grab that test, figure out who's going to do what. Learn Morse code. People have been learning Morse code for 100 years. Learn it. It's not that hard to do. It's designed to be learnable. Also, the Baconian alphabet. A, B, B, A, B, A is a letter E. As I mentioned, 2 is wrong is okay. This is one that you're going to have to figure out as a team. Is it better for you to do one 500-point question, or should you do 5 100-point questions? It depends on what you're comfortable with. Some people are really, really good at the hard ones. Do the 500-point question. Some people are really good at doing the easiest ones. That's what you have to decide as a team. Be comfortable. Before you walk into that test, you should know which way you're going to do it. As I mentioned, if you get stuck, don't just sit there. Try something. Pick anything. Pick a random letter. You'd be surprised how often your intuition is pretty good. Okay. Now, additional resources. As I mentioned, that document, I put it at the beginning. Science Olympiad, you know all of these. And there's, we've got a bunch of resources. There's a ton of tests on the national site. And also on Toebes.com, Codebusters, we have the test generation tools. You can have your coach generate practice tests for you. Obviously, you don't want to generate your own tests. Well, you can generate for other people on the team, but it's really useful for you to go torture your coach to have them generate a practice test for you. We have a test builder that will automatically generate a test of the various types. There's lots of YouTube videos that show you how to create the test. And if you find a bug or you got suggestions, put it in. We fixed it. If you have questions about the tools, send it to Codebusters. Obviously, for questions about how do I solve and things, that goes through other mechanisms. But if you run into some problem with the tools, that's what we're there for. Okay. With that, let's open up to more questions. What do we got, John?
Sounds good. Actually, we're going to start with a tip from Randy. And
yes.
He says he has a mnemonic for remembering the tap code. And he wants the group to know that the mnemonic is a fast lion quickly vanishes. So the mnemonic is a fast lion quickly vanishes.
Excellent.
To help you with those.
Was that Mr. Labaza?
It was.
That's that. So we should put him on the stage, but he is the National Event Supervisor for Division B.
Yeah.
And does half of this code.
All right. So here's a question from Jennifer about this is a pretty straightforward one on the Hill cipher. Will they see the Hill cipher in Division B?
No. The Hill is Division C. The Hill is Division C, and Affine is Division B. We did that deliberately. Just give each one has their own math.
All right. This one comes from Vahan, and he says he's seen Baconians with a group with 5 random letters in each with a crib. Any tips on how they should go about tackling that setup? Okay,
so if it's not a word Baconian, I'm assuming it's not a word Baconian, that it is just simply a Baconian symbol. And it's nice that they gave a crib. Then what you're going to do is you treat it not like they're letters. They're just random. They're just symbols that happen to be shaped like letters. And count up how many there are of each of them. I have done one like that where I, ha 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 ha, type cipher, but in general, you're just going to have to map the letters, treat them like symbols, don't treat them like letters. That will confuse you.
Okay. Lucia has one here asking, when it comes to like organizing their team, do you suggest each person on the team learns all the ciphers, or should different people learn different ciphers?
I have 2 answers to that question. One, I recommend you learn all the ciphers. If you have an opportunity to learn all the ciphers, I would learn all the ciphers. But that being said, many of the better teams I've seen have people that specialize. And so I've seen teams where there's a kid that they do all of the Hill ciphers. They love doing the Hill ciphers, and nobody on the team bothered to even do any Hill ciphers. So I definitely recommend, if you have someone who is really good at something, let them specialize. But so you don't have to learn all of the ciphers, but I would learn as many as you can. Because sometimes maybe they finish all the others. Maybe you finished all the ones that you like. Well, don't you want something else you can work on?
Yeah, well, there's that. And I also think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it always seems this is one of those events where the really good students or anybody really ends up using some intuition when they are solving some of these. And it's kind of nice to have somebody else in the group that knows a little something to challenge some of the guesses, some of the assumptions, some of the intuition, don't you think?
Absolutely. In fact, I highly recommend having people with a diverse background. There is a big benefit if you have someone who is English as a second language, because they think about words differently and they go quickly. You'd be surprised when you had to learn English not as your primary language, then you understand things about how words and letters are constructed that someone like myself, who's been speaking all my life, don't necessarily recognize.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So this one comes in from Erin, and she's looking for any tips on finding the keyword for a K3 aristocrat.
Yes.
They've listed examples, but she's still struggling with them.
Okay. So if you look in this Codebusters overview document, and it's right here on page, I love K3s, by the way. They're a lot of fun. Okay, if you look at this, page 24 in that Codebusters document, there's a walking through about how I approach this. So we get all the letters, and we get this solved, but now we need to go and map the letters. So here it is. I've solved it, and I get the mapping of the letters. And notice I don't even have all the letters. So in other words, I don't know what O maps to and P maps to, etc. That's okay. What we do is, so you're going to want to look at page 27 and read this in detail, but you're building up a table, and it's a flaw with K3 that both alphabets are the same. So in other words, and we deliberately don't make the shift more than 1 or 2. If we made the shift be 13 and gave you a 13-letter keyword, you'd never be able to solve it. But when the shift is small, so for example, QRS, if none of those are in the keyword, then you know that the Q follows by R, so then R might map to S. Depends on whether a shift is a 1 or 2. But here's an example that walks you through building up this table, and all you're doing is you're building up these little chains. It's like DNA chains, actually. You're figuring out how they attach together, and you're going to build the sequence. And in here, we get it. You can see once I've built this sequence, and you can do this on pencil and paper. And once you've written it together, you can see what it is, even though I didn't know what all the mappings of the letters were. So there is a strategy for it. There's a description, and this building the chains works really well to solve
it. This one comes from Vinod, and the question is, what's the easiest way to start an Affine cipher with even A?
Okay, so if you're doing an Affine cipher, you're going to be given, so I'm assuming they're asking at the regional level, which you're given a, let's see, if you're at the regional level, you're given A and B, then you just do the math. You just, you basically take the most frequent letters, you run them through the formula to see what they map to, and then you start guessing as the next letters that you would try and do the calculation for. So you start with A, you know what it maps to, you know that you have the formula. When you get to the state level, it's a different approach. what you have to do is you have to derive the math to figure out what the A and the B is. And you're solving for, basically you have two algebraic expressions that you're solving for A and B. And we give you examples. Again, I go back into the overview. We go to the affine. There it is. So with the affine, you have the formula, and well, actually here. So if you know some of the characters, then you go and you get the mapping, and you then compute the formula by subtracting the two, and that gives you what A and B are. And once you've done that, once you know A and B, it's all over for the affine. All you got to do is encode each letter to see what they map to, and then you can do the decode from that. So you're kind of solving like a Patristocrat as you fill in the letters.
All right. This one comes from Beatrice, and she's asking if she refers to it as the most important cipher to study in Division B. Do you have like I guess I would take it as what's the good starting point, or the real solid cipher to work on for kids in B?
Baconian, you're likely to see 3 Baconians on the test, and they all operate the same. That's not a bad one. If you want something that you're almost certainly going to be able to solve easily, the Porta cipher is a good choice. In this document, I will show you something at the bottom. Normally, when I'm talking to coaches, I give them this, but we have a suggested order for learning. So in that document, and by the way, if you can't find the document, if you go to Toebes.com Codebusters, it's right here at the top, the full guide to all ciphers. It's very easy to find this. But we tell you, here's an order that you might want to be learning. So for Division B, obviously Caesar and Atbash, those are great ones, and Porta. I would do that, and then Baconian. Those are great ones to have, and right off the bat, we're talking 6, 7 questions on the test. That's a third of the test.
No, it's a solid spot to start. All right, so this one comes from Anne, and then we're going to do a bunch because I think, if your goal was to shake some stuff up and get some people thinking, cryptarithms seem to be quite the topic this time.
Okay.
So Anne's question is, and I'll read the whole thing. It's for the cryptarhythm. My trio likes to figure out a couple of digit locations, translate those digits for the answer phrase, and then guess what the other numbers could be. So is this working backwards allowed, or in parentheses advisable?
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a wonderful way of doing it. That's why we did the cryptarithms the way that we did, is to give you both attacks at the problem. Either work it by solving, what people call the anagramming the solution, or by solving the math. So if you're good at the math, some people are really good at the math, they solve it that way, but I think the way that they're doing, there's nothing wrong with that, and I highly encourage it. It's a way to go faster. And I'm willing to bet you that they're solving in under 5 minutes.
Okay. So is that kind of the gold standard then for a cryptarhythm?
Under 5 minutes? Yeah, absolutely. In general, the target for all of these tests, to help everybody set sort of a benchmark, is we design the questions to take the average student by themselves 10 minutes to solve. That is the expectation in Codebusters. So if you can think about that, that means 5 students, 50 minutes. Nominally, you should expect up to 15 questions solved. In general, we see, for most teams, we see about 10. So that's you got to think about the time question, that everybody's all hands on deck for that. But yes, that's the expectation. We don't expect you to solve all of them.
Okay. So that's a good tip out there, and kind of setting your expectations, guys, and judging how your performance is doing at early phases of the season. All right, so we're sticking with cryptarithms because Jason asks, do you have any tips on solving square root / multiplication / division cryptarithms?
Yes, there's a lot of flaws in square roots. If you go to Toebes.com/ACA, there is in there is a Cryptarithms solving assistant, and if you give it a math problem, a division, this will do divisions, it will do square roots, then it shows you all the math that's associated with it, so it'll give you some ideas as to what you're trying to solve for. But I would be surprised if you see any square roots. In fact, if someone does see someone who has a test, a regional or a national with a square root or a other, please send them in my direction, because I want to know what approach they're taking to generate them.
Okay. And I think this one covered, Christina, I'm hoping the comment about the Cryptarithms site at the ACA is helped. And then John pointed out some stuff in the guidebook and had some other ideas for you on Cryptarithms there. So hopefully that captured and gives you some places to start. Next one I want to hit is, where is it? Aaron comes back and asks, what do you recommend you do when you get stuck on a Patristocrat?
It depends on how stuck you are. If you're stuck and you have, let's say, more than 50% of the letters and you're pretty comfortable with that, then it's time to start guessing based on frequency. Take a pick. In general, you're going to find for a Patristocrat that the first word is likely to be the or something fairly recognizable. We don't try and make it so that you're not going to be able to solve it. The word the is likely to be in there. So if you know where the letter E is, because you should start out with assuming the high frequency is going to be the ETAION letters. So you start out with the Patristocrat, setting the high frequency, and then from there, you start looking for words that are likely to be patterns. You can certainly know that if you saw ZQ, you know that the next letter, you know that those are two separate words. So you're going to look where consonants are to try and figure out where word breaks. And as you start finding word breaks, then more word breaks become obvious.
Okay. And hopefully, Christy, that helped. Christy was looking for some tips on Patristocrats. So they've tried finding letter patterns, but it's still quite difficult for them. So like you talked about with the, look at the frequencies, look at for word breaks. Anything else you might throw in there, John?
There is a thing, knowing where consonants and vowels are. There's a thing called a contact table that you can do it by hand. If you actually go to the Toebes.com ACA Aristocrat solver, it actually constructs the contact table. It's something that the ACA folks have for solving by hand, so it lets you identify which things are going to be vowels and which things are going to be consonants. So that's another trick to help you quickly identify. In fact, it even gives you an idea what consonants or vowels they might be. It's just how the English language happens to be worked, and all you're doing is you're seeing which letters are next to other letters.
Right. Let's see. All right. This one has to deal with, I guess, Baconian. So are there more tips for figuring out what each symbol stands for in the Baconian cipher when more than 4 symbols are used?
So the first thing you're going to look for is what things are in common. Yeah, you're going to have to build groups, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about a symbol Baconian, not a sequence Baconian and not a word Baconian. Right? So a symbol Baconian, at the end of the day, most test writers are lazy. And there's an even number of, even though the tool allows them to put more in the A and less in the B, almost all test writers are going to have the same number that are A's and B's. So what you then need to do is look at what groups make sense. Identify all the possible letters that can be in there and put them into groups. There's only a couple of ways that those groups can be together. give credit for Randy. Randy had a really devious one that he did that had you had three different possibilities. It was either a symbol above, a symbol below, or the shape of the letter. And if you know what you just got to pick what your groups are. Once you've given the possibilities, then counting is a very quick thing to do. Remember what I said before, that A's will be about 30% more than B's, just how the Baconian alphabet happens to work. And you can also look, you'll see two B's at a group of 5. The first will never be two B's. So that's the fastest way I would eliminate the choices of what might be A or B. Break into groups of 5 and look at what symbols are the start of each groups.
Okay. This one wants to go back to the Porta, right? Mm-hmm. Any advice on getting started with the keyword?
So with the Porta, So the first thing you do with the Porta is go write the letter. I mean, it's going to tell you what the key mapping is going to be, because if I give you both the cipher letter and the plain text letter, given where those two are in that table, that will tell us a keyword to pick. You're just going to know that. And so once you build that up, then you've got to guess, because the keyword could be any of 2 letters, right? It's either A, B, it could be C, D. You'll have to say, well, what word kind of makes sense? In some respects, it doesn't matter whether you figure out the word, as long as you know which collection of letters that is. But once you've subtracted those 2, then you've got the keyword, and then you can use the keyword to go figure out.
Okay. All right. So, couple of little things, because we're right up on time, and there's some. We're going to fly through a couple of these. Star is looking for, and you had any ideas where they might find additional quotes other than the ones that are in the original quote manager?
Well, we just added a couple hundred to the quote manager. There are several quote sites out there that are worth going to. You could go to Wiki Quotes. You could, and I've seen at least 2 different students who've put some tools out there that will go and give you a bunch of quotes to work from. Okay.
Yeah, the other one I will pull from is like IMDb or some of the movie quotes.
And Goodreads. Goodreads has a bunch of quotes.
Okay. And then is it safe to say, so Lucas is here looking for other tools and resources. So he mentions Puzzle Baron. You have that stuff up on the website, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's
and the science, the National Division C website and Division B website has links to a number of good resources.
So in both cases, Lucas, either check out the Toebes.com and see what John's got posted there, or come to soinc.org and take a look at the Codebusters event page.
Right, and we've got lots of so if you go to Toebes.com Codebusters, there's a lot of sample solving guides, and there's even on Young Tyros, you can search your favorite cipher, and there's lots more examples there.
All right. And last but not least, and we'll get to some of the housekeeping questions. Beatrice asks, Beatrice, good for you. She says that she likes reading. Is there a good book about codes that you would recommend?
I don't have any right off the bat. And the reason why is some of the ones I've looked at tend to either be focused on one, but I haven't found anything that sits on my book, other than the fact that I am a member of the ACA, and I get their, I should have had it here. I have them right here. I get the bi-monthly cryptogram, which has tons of ciphers in them, including aristocrats. In fact, all the ciphers that we use, there'll be some of them in the cryptogram, and it's every other month. And that's something that if you're looking for more ciphers and some more fun things to do, they're there.
All right. All right. So housekeeping wise, there are a couple of people that asked, can you get the recording of this video and the PowerPoint? Yes, we will send you the recording as soon as it's available in the cloud. We'll post it on Olympiad TV. We'll get the slides up and let you know where the slides are at. There's a number of people asking for real specific tips around particular, solving particular ciphers or ways you could kind of speed up the process. I will once again point out John's talked about the guidebook he has put together that is on Toebes.com. It's also on the national website. But the cool thing about the book is not only does it give you suggestions on if you're a coach, kind of what order should you try and master these different ciphers in. I think for every cipher that's part of the competition, he walks you through solving one and talks about a whole different things and a bunch of different examples in the book. I'd love to encourage you to go take a look at that one. And let's see. Yep. Oh, and last but not least, Anne throws out that for book recommendations, for anybody that's really into the topic, her daughter who's in middle school really loved Enigma Girls. It's nonfiction. It's about World War II and not necessarily code practice. It's not practicing cryptanalysis, but it's about, using cryptanalysis. So that's a great one. For older kids, the Double Helix. So the biography written by James Watson's book has some great stories about kind of how code breaking informed their work on understanding biology. And is it, I want to say the Imitation Game, which I believe is both a movie and a book about the Enigma device, is absolutely a fantastic read if you're just looking for more global stuff. Okay, finally, if anybody wants to, if you go to you're not done with Codebusters. I know Arkansas Science Olympiad, they're doing a webinar that I think may have just started or will be starting shortly. So you can go to the Arkansas Science Olympiad website or find their Facebook page, and they'll have information if you want to grab some more Codebusters help. Like I said, we'll get this posted. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Wish you all the best on the season. And if we could thank John for taking his time and all the hard work he does to share his love of ciphers and cryptanalysis with all of us. It's, again, always fascinating, John. Love listening to you explain this stuff and talk about it.
Don't forget Randy, too. Randy
as well. Apologize. Yeah. Randy, yep. Randy being out in the audience and making sure he's contributing and helping. And I mean, part of the great Codebusters team we now have at Science Olympiad.
Thank you. This was fun.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. All right. Everybody have a great night and wish everybody the best and, good luck on the rest of the season.